The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Bill Kristol is the editor of the Conservative Weekly Standard. We know he really does not like Donald Trump. He's been teasing a possible third-party challenger to Trump, a right-wing challenger to Trump, I guess a more truly conservative alternative to Donald Trump, who is the presumptive Republican nominee. Over the weekend, Bill Kristol tweeted the following, which I will put up on the screen for you. Just a heads up, over this holiday weekend, there will be an independent candidate, an impressive one, with a strong team and a real chance. Impressive? I don't know. It has now been revealed that it's a guy named David French. Who on earth is David French, Lewis? He's a staff writer for the National Review, which is sort of a competing conservative publication to the Weekly Standard. He used to work as a lecturer at Cornell School of Law. He was senior counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, as well as the Alliance Defending Freedom. So if nothing else, he does have credentials at the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is an absolutely horrific organization. Is this for real, is the obvious question. According to CBS News, it is. Supposedly, Mr. French is considering it seriously and is in contact with what CBS News describes as lots of serious people. Trump responded by calling Bill Kristol a loser. And I know that sounds like a joke. Yeah, right. Trump just said Bill Kristol's a loser. No, he actually said it at multiple campaign appearances that this all comes down to Bill Kristol being a loser, and added that if dummy Bill Kristol actually does get a spoiler to run as an independent, say goodbye to the Supreme Court. Trump may well be right about that.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't think that this guy really has a chance at all. I mean,
you don't say.
What? Yeah. Well, I mean, even if this were someone who was more well-known
or known by anyone,
some type of prominent politician. I mean, you're not even showing your face to the general public until almost what month is it?
June.
June, and no one has even seen your face yet. That just doesn't work.
The guy, obviously, if he does choose to run, has no shot whatsoever at being the president of the United States. The real question, though, is can he put together enough support? Really, it would only matter in swing states to turn some of those over to whether it's Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, the eventual Democratic nominee. And we don't even have any data to tell us about that yet. This is an unknown guy with no public persona to speak of, no Wikipedia page as of a couple days ago when his name was first floated. He's potentially going to be running against Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, who are very, very much disliked, but they're very, very well known. And it is so hard to imagine this guy getting any traction. But the reality is it doesn't matter, because anyone who might run as a third-party candidate doesn't need that much traction to potentially impact this election. Even though I've mentioned this before, by the way, in talking about Trump as a third-party candidate, today, if you want to get in the race as a third-party candidate, it's too late to get on the ballot in all 50 states. The deadlines have passed for many states, like, for example, Texas. But as long as you can get on the ballot in some swing states, you can make a difference. If you look at a state like Ohio, where I know Trump and Hillary, who knows what would happen, but traditionally it's very close in Ohio. If Gary Johnson, the libertarian, can get 1% to 2%, and David French or whoever ultimately runs, if anybody, directed by Bill Kristol, can get 1% to 2%, that 2% to 4% combined could actually flip Ohio and put it more safely in the hands of the Democratic nominee.
Turn my mic on, maybe. Microphone, good. I don't know. I think that percentage that you're talking about is too high. I don't even think that they'll even get close to that.
You don't think that if he was relatively well funded, right? Bill Kristol gets behind him. Who are the other trustworthy conservatives?
Exactly.
If people that conservatives trust say vote for David French, and I don't know who those people would be, but I assume exist, to take a page out of Donald Trump's phraseology. 1% to 2% is not crazy. And we see that Gary Johnson is, people seem at least somewhat interested in Gary Johnson as an alternative to Donald Trump. I don't think this is crazy.
Well, I don't know. I just don't see it. As far as third-party candidates go, it's been a long time since we've had one that's capable of making an impact. And any time a failed Republican or Democratic candidate that runs as a third party is usually the one who's going to have a chance of making an impact, I just don't see it.
All bets are off, though. I mean, our normal assessments of how any particular factor could influence the election are way off. I was watching CNN earlier today, and they had a roundtable of 5 or 6 political people. They had a Republican former Giuliani advisor who was clearly just against Trump. They had another Republican advisor who said he would actually trust Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump on foreign policy because, as he said, she's like a reliable sort of hawkish moderate, which is a whole other story we've been discussing. I think all bets are off here. We don't really know how this could all turn up.
No, but we're making our guesses. My guess is that this guy will have zero impact.
There's really odd video going around of President Barack Obama. There's no shortage of criticisms to make of Donald Trump, valid criticisms, sound criticisms. President Obama had a moment close to a minute long during an event in Indiana yesterday where he was trying to slam Donald Trump, and he had like a deer in the headlights almost, and I hesitate to say this, Lewis, but I want clarity this evening, and I say this with peace and love, to quote Ringo Starr, but I have to say it. Sarah Palin-like moment of stuttering and deer in the headlights. I don't know if the teleprompter went down or what happened here. I apologize for the buzzing noise in the background, but listen to this. I can't figure out what happened here.
If we turn against each other based on divisions of race or religion, if we fall for, a bunch of okey doke, just because it sounds funny or the tweets are provocative, then we're not going to build on the progress that.
I get the point. Not really President Obama at his most eloquent. I mean, for Sarah Palin, this would be what I would call an unmitigated success if she was able to be this coherent during a speech. But President Obama, if you're watching the video, looking around almost like he's tracking a fly in front of him, right? I mean, this is very un-Obama-like.
It does look, the speculation is that the teleprompter stopped working.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's exactly what happened because his line of sight kind of changes.
Right.
He goes from one to the other, but then he kind of stops and he's looking in other directions.
Yeah.
And so you'll see during a newscast that occasionally someone will pause for a second and then they're not looking at the screen anymore. They're not looking at you. They're looking at
sort of either papers or sort of the middle distance, and they seem sort of disoriented. Yeah.
But the real pros will just immediately go right to the papers on the desk and not lose a step.
Sure.
But they are normally writing their own bits.
Yeah.
Obama does not. I believe he does not write his own.
No, but
speeches.
certainly he's reviewing the material, you would guess. Rachel is here. Rachel, I know you watched this earlier. You seem to find. What do you think happened here? If you had to guess, I want to let you chime in.
I would probably go with the idea that the teleprompter stopped working because I feel like when you're tracking his range of vision, it does kind of seem to change. So I think that's the most likely explanation.
Yeah, and you've dealt with teleprompters going down during speeches, I know, and you would not have handled it in this way, right?
I would like to say I wouldn't, but I feel like when you're talking about Trump, all bets are off.
Yeah. So you tell me what you think happened. I don't know, but a very, very strange moment for President Obama. But still, as incoherent as he was, still not that difficult to criticize Donald Trump because it just all makes no sense.
Criticizing Donald Trump is the easiest thing there is. So, an unusual moment for Obama. I almost feel bad for him. Almost.
Do you? Really?
Almost. You got to
not
be prepared for this. You can't let this happen. You're the president.
Unless there actually was a fly that was in his line of sight, which was distracting.
Unless it flies into your mouth, I see no reason why this should happen.
Send me your thoughts on Twitter as to what happened here. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. Lewis is on Twitter at Lewis Motamin.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Brian Huffman. Brian understands, Lewis, that this is viewer-supported media, and he's getting all of those great member benefits, including the bonus show, only for members, hosted and produced by producer Lewis. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. You can also sample most of these member benefits there as well. I have a terrific and tremendous documentary recommendation today for you. It is called More Than Honey. Lewis, we've talked about what's going on with bees, not only in the United States, but around the world. And we know that bees are an integral part of so much of what goes on with our food supply. And some people have said, Lewis, famously, no bees, no honey. I'm sorry, no bees, no people. That's what I mean.
Yes.
And this documentary tracks the entire problem and what is being done to try to stimulate the bee population. Such a well-done film, although kind of meandering and hard to follow in some parts.
Is it? Yep, it's on my queue via your recommendation.
Yep.
Not this one, but your original recommendation to me.
Right.
And I love honey. Dave, I love honey so much.
Yep.
Bees are massively important.
And you bathe in melted beeswax, right? Are you doing that still?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't done that in quite some time. But it is a great topic. It's a great subject. And it's crazy what's happening to bee populations.
Yep. And the film includes explanations of sort of how you can take an invasive bee's nest that may be in a home and at least make attempts to relocate it and create a healthy hive. It explores the question, which is an interesting question, of when you talk about bees, is the important organism the bee, or is it really the hive? And as we know, Lewis, when bees die, the beehive can basically create whatever role bees they need, be it a queen or a drone or a worker or whatever. It is endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, the hive mind, the way they are programmed. You see the individually, what are they? I mean, not much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so More Than Honey is the name of the documentary. You can check it out on Netflix. It's available on Amazon. And you can get a list of all of our recommendations at davidpakman.com/recommendations. That is the spot. Okay, let's talk about Hillary Clinton and some cringe-worthy video that I saw yesterday. It's been suggested in some circles, and there are a bunch of articles, including at least one in the New York Times, speculating that California Congressman Xavier Becerra is possibly in the running to be Hillary Clinton's running mate. He is an American-born lawyer. He wasn't born a lawyer. He was born in the U.S., but he had to learn to be a lawyer. Born to... I realized I could have used confusing language.
Yeah, he comes right out of the womb as an esquire, right?
Yeah. Born to Mexican immigrants. He's the fourth-ranking Democrat in the House of Representatives. Something about that is just really funny. He is the highest-ranking Hispanic lawmaker in the Democratic Party. And he was asked in an interview, if you were chosen, would you accept the vice presidential nomination to Hillary Clinton? He said yes. He's been very active in California. California votes next week in the primary. He's been campaigning for Hillary Clinton in the state. And I have audio and video of him stopping by a Mexican restaurant in the East Los Angeles neighborhood of Boyle Heights with MSNBC's Jacob Sabaroff. And I watched the video a bunch of times, and each time it felt more and more cringeworthy. I don't know if it's that they brought the Hispanic guy to a Mexican restaurant to talk to the person working there and order items in Spanish. But maybe it's that the girl behind the counter revealed herself to be a Bernie supporter. And what's amazing is the arguments that Xavier Becerra made to her while actively campaigning for Hillary Clinton were not very good arguments. But every time I watched this, Lewis, I felt more and more uncomfortable with it. Let's take a look and see if you experienced the same thing.
I'll take the sampler and I will take...
One sampler?
The mole, gotta get the mole. You know you got the...
We'll send you a pescado.
Just saying.
Pescados are really good here.
Okay. Possibly next Vice President of the United States in Guisados today.
Oh.
You didn't deny it, by the way, just saying. Did you pick who you're voting for on Tuesday yet?
No, not yet.
How about you?
I'm waiting to hear who the vice president is going to be.
Oh, I hear, we got a good chance right here. Did you pick who you're going to vote for?
Yes.
Bernie or Hillary?
Bernie.
Bernie? Uh-oh, you got to make a pitch to her.
Yes, you have to, because I'm set on Bernie.
Wow.
Bernie's got some great ideas, but up until 2 months ago, you probably hadn't heard much about Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton has been with us for a long time. When you want a president, you want someone who you know is there with you. Do you speak Spanish?
Yes.
You've heard the saying, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres.
Can I ask you what year you were born?
95.
95. Is that part of the problem, that some of these folks are too young to remember what the work of Hillary
And
Clinton
it's not so much a problem, it's a reality. For you didn't, that wasn't a reality for you. But we went through some tough times in the 90s.
What is it about Bernie? Why Bernie and not Secretary Clinton?
Well, when I hear Bernie speak, the first time I heard him speak, he just really inspired a lot of motivation, energy. His ideas are really good, especially for young people. Just with Hillary, I just feel that some of the things she's done in the past, some of the things she said didn't really resonate with me particularly. I know it might have resonated with you, but for who's looking out for me, I really feel it's Bernie Sanders.
If you want a friend in Washington, this man could be the next vice president of the United States.
That last thing makes it all the worse, right? The young lady makes a good case as to why Bernie Sanders' ideas resonate more with her. And then Jacob Saboroff from MSNBC says, well, yeah, but forget all that. This guy could be the next VP, and he's in here ordering food from you today. Oh, well, that changes everything then.
Isn't that the epitome of like the Clinton?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I actually like Xavier Becerra. I think he's smart. I think he has the right views on most issues. But to say, well, Hillary has been around longer. Bernie's ideas are great, but Hillary's been around longer. Number one, it's not true, right? I mean, Bernie Sanders has been around in the political world longer than Hillary Clinton has, partially by virtue of being older than her by a few years. But also, why is the better candidate the one who's been around longer? That doesn't really make sense to me. And then on top of that, he says, you weren't old enough to live this, but things were bad in the 90s. How is that a pitch for Hillary Clinton? None of this made sense to me, and it seemed to be an ill-conceived idea from the get-go.
Yeah, Bernie was also still a public servant in the 90s, and a senator, I believe, still at that time. So I find it really obnoxious.
Congressman at the time.
I find it really obnoxious when people say that about, oh, well, Hillary's been with us for a long time. Everybody knows Hillary. Who's Bernie?
Right.
No, who knows who Bernie is?
I don't find this to be pandering. It just strikes me as sort of weird. And I'm not even saying Xavier Becerra would be a bad choice. I like Xavier Becerra. The possible negatives are he's relatively unknown. If we're going to talk about with a VP, maybe one of the benefits is that they have name recognition compared to Cory Booker or Elizabeth Warren. He's also from California, which isn't a swing state. Strategically, he may bring less than somebody from another part of the country. But maybe those conventional ideas are sort of worthless because you're running against Trump and who knows what will happen.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this guy after this video, Dave. I
Really?
gotta be honest with you. Yeah, it's just I find it so obnoxious. And much like I find Hillary to be that way.
The case against Donald Trump and Trump University that's going to trial just got way worse for Donald Trump. Yesterday, I told you that a former employee of Trump University said in a deposition that the entire operation was a scam. That was Ronald Schnackenberg. He's currently suing Donald Trump, though, so some are calling into question his credibility. All right, well, let's put Schnackenberg aside for a second. Iraq War veteran Corinne Sommer is not allowed to publicly speak about the settlement she reached with Trump University after she was fired in 2007. But because this trial is going forward, we now know that she believes she was fired by Trump University because of her military responsibilities as a reservist. Allegedly, based on her statements in this deposition, she was told that her work as a member of the U.S. military was interfering with her work for Trump University, and thus she was going to be let go. She said, quote, "I was fired because I was in the military. At the end of my performance evaluation, they wrote that it was a problem that I was in the military." A few months prior to that, Sommer was fired from Trump University, or rather, a few months before she was fired from Trump University, another veteran, Air Force Senior Master Sergeant Richard Wright, was fired from his job as a mentor at Trump University and at specifically the Trump Institute of Trump University. He had just come back from a deployment in Afghanistan, and his bosses told him, allegedly, all of your absences have forced us to reevaluate your position in the organization. If true, Lewis, this would be against the law.
Yes, but if there is a policy about that type of thing, absences and whatever.
But there is federal law which says you have to abide by certain principles when it comes to employees of yours in the military, and that they are different in terms of active duty versus reservists who have to do their yearly and monthly requirements. And you cannot do that. I mean, if true, it would be against the law. And here's where I get stuck, Louis. Trump University is denying all of the allegations, obviously. But Trump said he's moving forward with the trial rather than settling because he doesn't settle cases when they're not right. Corinne Sommer received a settlement. So by Trump's own logic, does that mean that they did recognize she had a case against them for firing her, as she claims, for being a member of the military?
Whoever was involved with that must have. Whoever was working for Trump University, illegally or as part of Trump University. Yeah, but I don't think Donald Trump was personally involved at that point, right? I mean,
I doubt that he was, but the problems with Trump's so-called support of the troops are numerous, Louis. He's had veterans issues become a central theme with all of the questionable supposed donations of millions of dollars that he claims to have personally made. Of course, we haven't seen his taxes and haven't actually seen any proof that those donations happened. We saw him not participate in debates specifically because he was going to raise money for veterans. We don't know what ultimately happened with that. And now these allegations. Donald Trump is not the support the troops guy. That seems abundantly clear.
Yeah, I don't think so. And he probably would have settled this some time ago if it weren't for the bad optics. If he weren't running for president, if he weren't where he is right now, he would have settled, right?
Maybe. His claim is, I don't settle when I'm not in the wrong, and we'll see what ultimately happens. We will take a break. After the break, I'll speak to Dr. Yoni Freedhoff. What do all those labels mean on the front of food boxes? He'll tell us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to be joined today by Dr. Yoni Freedhoff, who's an assistant professor of family medicine at the University of Ottawa. In 2004, he became the founder and medical director of the Bariatric Medical Institute, which provides non-surgical weight management. It's so great to have you on. I first learned of you through the documentary Sugar Coated, which is fascinating. And what I want to focus in on with you today is the idea of how foods are labeled. And this includes both the term natural on foods, for example, but also some of these specific programs where foods are part of some kind of approved healthy options list. And as it turns out, and as you know, these lists often don't really communicate that much about whether a particular food is healthy, do they?
No, and unfortunately, many of these programs, although they might not appear to be so on the surface, they're often industry programs where, PepsiCo is deciding what is, so to speak, healthy or not on the basis of their front of package program. And so we have this situation where the fronts of packages really are a battleground for consumers and for the food industry, where the food industry, of course, wants to use that real estate to market food and to suggest to consumers or to tell consumers clearly that the contents of this box or jar are incredibly healthful contents. Unfortunately, consumers are left with this situation where we have to turn boxes around to determine if the fronts were telling the truth. That is not a good situation for consumers to be in, period, let alone at a time when chronic non-communicable diet-related diseases are on the march.
Can you give us some examples? You mentioned PepsiCo, but could you give us some specific examples of particular programs that people might recognize, right? The Heart Healthy one in the U.S. is one that I remember. And some of these examples of foods that are on those lists but really shouldn't be.
That's right. So I'm here in Canada, and we up until very recently had a program that was run by our Heart and Stroke Foundation, akin to the American Heart Association. And the program that we had is like the Heart Check program in the States. These programs were designed with really good intentions. The hope was to try to help consumers steer towards healthier options. I think what got lost in the shuffle was that in many cases, these healthier options would be more fairly describable as less awful options. And there is a world of difference between healthful and less awful. Here in Canada, the straw that broke that program's back was the use of that program to endorse those fruit gummies, the ones they look like candies, right? They actually have, in many cases, more sugar than candies, where by weight, they are in the neighborhood of 80% sugar. And so I don't think that the Heart Check program in the States does check off those fruit gummies, but that was sort of the push to finally remove this program here in Canada. And it is now a done deal. That program no longer exists. There's Sensible Choices is a front of package program. There's so many of them. Now, there are some programs that are non-industry based. One that's fairly common in the United States, one that I actually kind of like, is called NuVal. NuVal scores foods on scales of 0 to 100 based on an algorithm that in turn determines whether or not food is healthful. And that algorithm is one that was designed by scientists who were shielded from the food industry. Ultimately, though, I think in my sort of if I were king world, I would like to see these programs, all of them, including the better ones, removed from the fronts of packages. I think we consume far too much in the way of ultra-processed food, the stuff in the boxes and the jars and so forth. We need a real push towards produce and a push away from products. And generally, those front-of-package programs serve to confuse.
Is there any claim that uses the word may that is worth anything in terms of making food choices? And what I mean by that is you often see this may contribute to better heart health, lower cholesterol, whatever. If the word may is there, how should one interpret that?
I think anytime you see any claim on the front of any package, you should be quite skeptical. Foods that are healthful don't require claims because they generally don't require packages. The fruit and vegetable aisle, the fish aisle, the fresh lean meat aisle, these are the foods that we need to be consuming more of. If your front of package is trying to convince you its contents are healthful, there's a reason for that. It's because you might be right to be skeptical. Seeing, Fruit Loops having a claim about whole grains and vitamin D, and people, and that reaction's a good one. People do laugh at that. Who's going to think Fruit Loops are healthful? But it's very possible that some consumers might think maybe because they've got whole grains and vitamin D, they're less bad for their kids than they thought. It gives people permission to buy. And again, I really don't think that the onus should be on consumers to have PhDs in nutrition to study ingredients panels to determine if those may claims actually have merit. We as a sort of science in general, we don't have the drilled down, this one nutrient will help you with that, evidence behind us as much as the world is told on a regular basis. We know that broad patterns of eating are good for you. Diets rich in fresh fruits and vegetables, in whole grains, in fish, in lean meats. We know those sorts of patterns are good for us in the sense of health. Once we get into the minutia, the nutrients, the omega-3, the vitamin this, the mineral that, well, then we're getting into the realm of hypothetical hope. And it is the minutia. Now, people worry so much about these tiny little things, these additives to foods, this fortification of crappy foods, rather than focus on the big picture, which is making food from fresh whole ingredients like once upon a time we all did on a very regular basis.
I'd love to get your take on the difference between some terms that are regulated and some terms that are not regulated. And the example that comes to mind is, in the US at least, natural versus organic. Organic, at least ostensibly, is a regulated term by the USDA, which has a particular meaning, whereas the word natural can essentially be thrown on any food regardless of whether it actually has any meaning or connection to what that food is. Question one is, talk to us about these unregulated terms and whether, how, if at all, those should influence our choices, but also, How important or meaningful is that something be labeled organic?
So these are marketing terms. Organic, you're right, has a definition that some people care quite a lot about in terms of the way animals are raised and whether they're using antibiotics or pesticides on plants and so forth. So for people who have concerns in regard to that area of sort of environmental concern or ethical concerns, organic is a term that would matter to them. But all of these terms for the food industry, they matter only in regards to marketing. And you're right, when you've got terms like natural, which don't have an agreed upon definition, they can be used quite liberally and, again, used to sell foods. I worry about the health halo effect of these things. The health halo effect is words that encourage people to believe that the product is more healthful than it is or less bad than it is, that would give people permission to eat those foods either more often or more of them. And we know that words like low fat have been shown to actually increase the caloric consumption of a particular food when compared with its full strength equivalent that people aren't mistaking for better for them. So these health halos are very powerful. And, there's even health halos from non-claim words, yogurt and granola and kale. And I mean, there's a whole realm of foods that now, just by their very nature, have health halos attached to them. And they are now, of course, being used to market hypercaloric processed foods, or foods that, in a sense, get away from the spirit of what the consumer who saw the word was looking for. McDonald's has a kale salad, which, if my recollection serves, has the calories of almost 2 Big Macs, but it has the word kale in it, and so people are going to buy it. And that's the world we've found ourselves in, where marketing words and health halos have huge influence on us. And I think we're here in part because we as consumers, we want simple solutions to complex problems. Our complex problem is that diet and weight-relatable diseases are really rising, and that the inconvenient truth of healthful living is that it requires effort. But if I can buy a box of this or a kale salad that and avoid the effort and get a simple solution to my problem, well, then that's what I want. But unfortunately, that's just not where we're at when it comes to nutrition.
So I think that gives our audience a really good framework as to where you're coming from and how to understand a lot of these terms. I'd love to run through just a few of the more common such terms that we hear and get your sense of what it is that's implied versus what it is that the consumer should watch out for. When something says no sugar added, what is it that one should be really paying attention to there?
Well, so especially if you know it's a sweet food, there probably is some sugar in it. I've seen the claim no sugar added on, for instance, grape juice, where every single glass of grape juice, depending on the brand, has between 8 and 10 teaspoons of sugar in it. And while that sugar did, in fact, come from grapes once upon a time, much of the nutrition that was associated with those grapes was stripped from that juice through its processing. And so no sugar added usually means that there's quite a lot of sugar. For viewers who don't yet know the math, it's not difficult. You take the grams of sugar and divide by 4, and that's the number of teaspoons you've got in that product. And as far as, sugars that are freed from fruit, once they are free sugars, you might as well consider them added sugars. And those are the ones that we're trying to encourage people to minimize in their diets.
Made with real fruit. How about that?
Well, that one too usually means sugar. So you'll look on the back and you'll see fruit concentrates or fruit purees. When you concentrate a fruit, you're left with a very concentrated pile of sugar, and with the purees too. And so generally made with real fruit, it is a product that is not, in fact, a fruit. And it's wrong to consider products that are made with real fruit to be fruit. Another analogy I use fairly regularly, people worry, especially about kids, eating enough fruit in their diets and in their lives. And so that said, you wouldn't give that child apple pies on a regular basis simply because they didn't consume apples. And yet many of these made with real fruit products might as well be apple pies as far as nutrition goes.
Could you talk a little bit about natural flavors? We did a story about this a few months ago, and natural flavors, I feel like, gives the impression of something that is almost the exact opposite of what it can actually be.
Yeah, so I mean, people often talk about natural flavoring and then they end up at beaver anal glands. I'm not sure if that's where your story went.
Castoreum,
Which,
right? Yeah.
yeah, which is natural. I mean, beaver anal glands are natural. I mean, I think there we lapse into another area that is challenging for consumers in general, and that's the natural fallacy, where there's this notion that natural means good. And there's this notion that if it is natural, you're safe in the sense of health. And, a common example for that comes from processed meats that will have celery extract instead of nitrites. But it's equivalently the same thing when it comes to chemical composition. It's just that one is a natural source of nitrites in the celery extract versus the ones that we manufacture in labs. But this idea that natural by definition means good is flawed. With springtime here in Ottawa, there's lots of mushrooms in my front yard because it's been raining lately. I don't think I should eat them, even though that they're natural. And, similarly, just because something is a chemical doesn't mean that it's bad for you. That is an instinctual belief system that we have, but it's flawed and it leads to trouble.
In the end, do we get back to what always seems to be the best advice, which is just limit the amount of food that's coming out of boxes and jars and cans that you eat and stick to the sort of perimeter of the grocery store as much as possible?
Well, the perimeter message is a funny one. If you go to your perimeter next time, you'll find that it's definitely been infiltrated by tons of ultra-processed foods. But yes, ultimately, we have to remember that at this point, there are no shortcuts to healthful living. It does require effort. It does require time. And there's no way around that. It's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. And it's unfortunate. Who among us doesn't wish we had more time and had to work less hard at things? But, that's a human failing. It's all of us. We all want that. But when it comes to nutrition and health and healthful living, there aren't any shortcuts yet. Maybe there will be one day. But certainly none on any horizon that I can see right now.
Dr. Yoni Freedhoff, Assistant Professor of Family Medicine at the University of Ottawa. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Since yesterday, there have been headlines all over the place claiming that a new study says Americans are having more gay sex. I've looked at the study, Lewis, and the study doesn't say that. What the study says is that more Americans are saying they have had gay sex, and that is a very, very different assertion. This is all from a study reported in the Archives of Sexual Behavior. It was released yesterday, and it says, indeed, the number of people who say they've had at least one same-sex sexual partner has increased from 3.6% to 8.7% for women, and from 4.5% to 8.2% for men. Most of this change can be attributed to bisexual behavior, going from only 3% to nearly 8%. The survey found that only 1.7% of men and 0.9% of women say they had exclusively homosexual sex. Now, the right is going crazy, Lewis. They're apoplectic over this. They're saying this is proof that we should be in a moral panic here in the United States because legal same-sex marriage and all of this stuff, talking about the fact that gay people exist in school, how dare we? This is convincing more people to become gay. Of course, that's ridiculous. The reality is this could all be attributed to the fact that being gay is just more acceptable now. And because more people are comfortable saying, yeah, I've had gay experiences, maybe bisexual, maybe exclusively gay experiences, but that has become more acceptable and less stigmatized. So that could account for much of the difference that we're seeing in the polls. There is actually no evidence whatsoever to suggest there are more gay people today than there were in the past.
Yeah, and so that's probably the reality of the situation.
There's one other possibility before you comment, Lewis.
Okay.
It also may be that it is true that people are having more gay sex, but not because there are more gay people, just because when there was more stigma, many people who realize that they were gay or bisexual, did not act on it, which the Christian right actually thinks is good. They don't seem to care so much about the urges. They say, we have Christian counseling and we can train you to not act on the urges. We can't necessarily fix the urges, although some people can, like former Navy chaplain Gordon Klingenschmidt.
Right. So look at it from their point of view. They're terrified because here you have a majority of them thinking that nobody is actually gay or bisexual, and now this is happening, and they must be mortified. But yes, it's got to be that just people are more comfortable because of this, because the stigma is just not there or not as prevalent.
And the study backs that up as well. Back in 1973, only 11% of respondents felt there was nothing wrong with same-sex sexual behavior. In 1990, it had climbed to 13%, but now in 2014, that number was 49%. 49% of respondents say they see nothing wrong whatsoever with same-sex sexual behavior. And if you look at the youngest group, that is the group where this acceptance has exploded by 4 times, which is not surprising to that many people. I've said before, Louis, my little sister, who's 12, if she's aware, it's barely aware of the fact that it's even controversial to have 2 moms or 2 dads, or that there are same-sex relationships. I mean, because of the era she grew up in, born in 2004, if I were to tell her that there is huge controversy that is only now starting to slightly die down over the fact that sometimes people are attracted to members of the same sex, she would be confused by it. It wouldn't make any sense.
Not just the time she grew up in, but location still has something to do with it, right?
Yes, Massachusetts, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is, I think there is nothing surprising here whatsoever. The right is going completely crazy, and of course most people realize that sexual orientation isn't a choice. I would argue we are better off with people not engaging in heterosexual sex merely to avoid the repercussions of stigma and shame. I think that that's bad. I don't think it's a victory if gay people choose to have straight relationships just because of social stigma. I know that there are people who disagree. There are those on the right, Louis, who say, no, that is good. We should applaud that. But I don't buy into that at all.
Yeah. Moral of the story, don't lie to yourself.
Right. Or other people, ideally.
Yeah.
Although that can be more complex, as we know.
That definitely. Oh, yeah.
We talked this week about the colistin-resistant E. coli bacteria found in the urine of a 49-year-old. And when you hear about foodborne illness outbreaks, it's often meats. We've seen chicken, for example. Sometimes it's produce. Remember the spinach outbreak of not that long ago. But flour typically seems like a relatively safe food product in terms of its ability to carry bacteria. But now food factory General Mills has recalled 10 million pounds of white flour in connection with a possible E. coli outbreak. Now, to be clear, there are no confirmed cases of E. coli connected to General Mills flour definitively. But the issue is that going back to December of 2015 and continuing all the way up until this month, the CDC has been trying to track down an E. coli outbreak that sickened nearly 40 people across 20 states. And more than half of the people who got sick reported having baked something with General Mills flour prior to getting sick. You might say, well, why can't we figure this out, right? Why is it so difficult? The E. coli timing makes it very difficult to track down definitively. You often have a 3 to 10 day incubation period before you can necessarily show symptoms. So it's very difficult to trace this to a particular kitchen or location. General Mills, Louis, I guess doing the right thing though, right? An abundance of caution here, saying it's possible that our flour may have been involved here, so we're going to recall 10 million pounds.
They can afford to do that. It's really no big deal for them, I'm guessing, but 10 million pounds, quite a bit. Yeah, play it safe.
Also recommending not to eat raw cookie dough because you can cook off many of the bacteria when you fully cook products, as we know with meat and so many others. I never got into the eating of raw cookie dough. I don't know that I've ever done that in my life.
I have. Also not a huge fan.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I'd just rather have the cookie.
Yeah. You drink raw eggs in the morning, right?
Never.
Never. Okay,
Nope.
yeah, that was somebody else. Yeah, I
Right.
forgot. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Yesterday, we talked about Donald Trump criticizing the judge involved in the Trump University case for being Spanish, or as Trump eventually corrected himself, Hispanic. And here is the Eggman weighing in on A Spanish.
Hey, Pac-Man, the only reason you don't like Donald Trump is because you're Spanish.
Yeah, short and to the point. I am A Spanish, A period Spanish, and I don't like Donald Trump as a result of that. It's, the Eggman has really left some gems on our voicemail number lately, but many of them have 15 to 20 swears in them. And when I mention that, people think that they're incredibly compelling voicemails. They're good. They're what we would expect from the Eggman, but they're not particularly more compelling because of the 15 swears. We just can't I can't in good conscience assign the task to Lewis of bleeping 15 to 20 swear words from a voicemail. We just can't do it.
If we were to play every Eggman voicemail and bleep them all, we'd have to hire someone part-time
just to bleep his voicemails.
Just do all the bleeping. But keep sending them in. Maybe just fewer swears, but keep a few in there, Eggman, because you have to.
219-2-DAVID-P is the voicemail number. Call anytime. On the bonus show today, Lewis will tell us about China's marriage problem. We will hear about the Theranos founder reportedly being worth $0 and the Thai Tiger Temple story. Say that 5 times fast. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Remember, you can get instant access to all of the great member benefits by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.